So our next talk, I know many of you are curious about public health as it relates to people and pets with HABs, and that's the talk we're going to hear next. So I'd like to welcome Alex. All right, Alex Rafalski, toxicologist with Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for the organizers of this, and thanks everyone for attending. Looking forward to this discussion. And like Erica mentioned, my name is Alex Rafalski. I'm a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and I help coordinate public health responses to HABs across the state. And so why are HABs a health concern? And that's because they can contain cyanotoxins. And so as we've been discussing, cyanobacterial blooms are considered harmful because many of them have the potential to produce toxins. And so there are a number of toxins that they may contain, and we can group those into what health effects they are associated with. And so there's hepatotoxins or liver toxins called microcystins, nodularins, and cylindrospermopsin. There are neurotoxins, so that affects the nervous system. Some are called anatoxin A and saxitoxins. There are dermatoxins or skin toxins. And we're learning more about really all the compounds that these cyanobacteria can contain. And so there's some things like lipopolysaccharides in the cell walls that we think might be irritants. So that might be causing or responsible for causing like skin irritation or gastrointestinal irritation. And different species of cyanobacteria can produce one of these, or they may produce a couple of them. And I have an asterisk here next to microcystins, nodularins, cylindrospermopsin, and anatoxin A. And these are the ones that our state of Michigan agencies measure in the harmful algal blooms that we respond to. And so the health effects that people and animals might experience depends on a number of factors. And so one of those being, how are you being exposed to the cyanobacteria and the toxins they might contain? And so primarily that's usually through recreation. So that's, swimming in the water or jet skiing in the water, wading in the water, maybe fishing. And there is a potential for cyanobacteria to be in water bodies that are used as drinking water sources. I think someone mentioned that in 2014, microcystin in HABs in Lake Erie affected the Toledo public water supply. I will say that since approximately 2019, public water supplies in Michigan have been voluntarily sampling their drinking water for cyanotoxins, and that we've found no issues to date. And so as far as the health effects that people might experience from recreation, that's going to depend on like the duration and frequency of that exposure. Are you wading into the water, or are you swimming and ingesting the water? Or are you wading in and you're just having skin contact? The amount of toxin that's present, the type of toxin that's present. So in the testing that we've done throughout the state since 2017, microcystin is by far the most common toxin that we've found. And anatoxin A and cylindrospermopsin we find much less frequently. And then some other individual risk factors can affect the health effects that you may experience. So younger people and older people tend to be more sensitive to health effects. Certain underlying medical conditions may influence the health effects you experience. So these liver toxins, if you have liver disease, they may be more harmful. Also, certain skin conditions might make you more likely to get a rash from your exposure. And then here's a list of some of the symptoms you might experience if you come in contact with a HAB or the toxins. So skin irritation, respiratory irritation, gastrointestinal illness, neurological symptoms, and potentially harm to the liver and kidneys. And it's really the exposure route that's going to affect the symptoms. And so ingestion of the cyanobacteria and the toxins, that's what's going to be, potentially harming the liver, or that's where you're going to experience the gastrointestinal effects. If you have direct skin contact, that's what's going to cause the rashes. Inhalation of aerosolized droplets, so jet skiing or boating through a bloom could bring up those toxins into the air, and you could be inhaling them. Kind of already touched on drinking contaminated water, but obviously that would be a potential for ingestion of toxins. And these pictures here show, what not to do. You can see people in what is, obviously a cyanobacteria bloom. You guys are all experts on identifying those, very impressed. And this is exactly what we would recommend avoiding. And that, And then I put this slide in here. So there's a lot of health effects discussed on here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is to show that exposure can potentially affect a number of organ systems and things throughout your body in both animals, humans and animals. And, there's a lot of symptoms on here that people might experience with other potential, like waterborne diseases, or they're just not very specific to HAB exposure. And there are no medical tests right now that are specific to like the cyanotoxins. And so, if you do get sick because you suspect of a HAB, that's really important to mention to your doctor or your veterinarian. Mention to them that you're suspicious of your contact with a potential HAB. And so Michigan has a One Health approach to responding to harmful algal blooms. And this graphic shows the different state agencies and local health departments and their role in that response. And we have a interagency work group of representatives from these agencies, and our goals with harmful algal blooms, including monitoring the geographic extent and occurrence of these blooms, conducting surveillance for human and animal illnesses, educating the public, communicating and coordinating on public health advisories when needed, and then addressing and identifying emerging concerns related to harmful algal blooms. And so we do these efforts with a bunch of partners. We have Sea Grant and others on the call today, work with local health departments, local lake associations often, universities, federal agencies, etc. And so it's been mentioned a couple times today that we do encourage people to report suspicious looking algae blooms to EGLE, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. And so you can do that by emailing them at algaebloom@michigan.gov. And much of what I think we know about the occurrence of HABs across the state comes from reports from mostly citizens, something that they've observed on their lake. And so really encourage reporting if you see a suspicious looking algae bloom. And Eagle assesses those reports for any that look like potential HABs, cyanobacterial blooms. They can determine if a site visit is necessary or feasible, and then toxin testing can occur if appropriate. And they share this information with NDHHS and other agencies. And so as far as next steps for public health actions, we're going to perform some risk assessment of the, facts of the bloom. And so, quantitative toxin analysis is a measure of potential cyanotoxin exposure, but it's really not the only factor we consider when evaluating the risk of these blooms. Like others have mentioned, it can take a long time to get the results of toxin tests. And also these blooms can be very dynamic, and so they can, disappear. They might change location, and then they're living organisms, and the blooms can grow and reduce, and the toxin concentrations are going to grow and reduce with them. So a single snapshot in time of a toxin concentration isn't usually the only thing that we consider when doing our public health risk assessment. And so, what do we consider? It's the proximity of the bloom to recreational areas, the extent around the lake, the duration of the bloom. Yes, we look at toxin concentrations, any history of toxin detection on the lake. So we can't say for certain that year to year that, if a HAB produced toxins in the past, that it's going to produce toxins the next year, but certainly we have a lot of examples where that's the case. And, we might consider any reported illnesses and then the water body uses. And so
this is your 1 minute warning. So,
oh, 1 minute. Wow. Okay. So we're going to consider these factors, and public health actions range from no action to like awareness or health education, communication, up to maybe advisories and closures. And so to give some examples of what this might look like. So, sometimes these blooms are very, just like this picture, just like sparse and like just very small. This is like a 1 square foot area. Maybe at the end of the season, so in an isolated canal. So it's like maybe not going to be doing anything with this report. Up to, there's blooms along lakefront properties, and we want to get health education materials out there, up to maybe a bloom's occurring at a beach and it should be closed while the bloom is present, up to, assessing for any drinking water concerns. And so kind of touched on this. The key point is that the data suggests that avoiding cyanobacteria minimizes most exposures. And so what we've done over the years is we've taken samples for toxins in visible blooms, and then we've collected samples for toxins in like clear water right by them. So this is an example of that at a beach. And so for microcystin, which is the most common toxin we see, the average scum concentration might be something like 179 micrograms per liter, but the average ambient water, and this is from many pairs of scum and ambient samples across different blooms, the average ambient concentration is like 1.6 micrograms per liter. And as far as a recreational guideline for comparison for microcystin, we use the EPA guideline of 8 micrograms per liter. So where many scums exceed that, and you don't want to be contacting the scum, that the ambient is often below that when we're talking about microcystin. And so I just want to note that, Michigan has 11,000 inland lakes, And we have not, received HAB complaints on many of those. And so we want people to have fun in the water. We just want people to become familiar with what cyanobacterial blooms look like and to avoid them and keep themselves and pets out when they see them. For your pets, same thing. The advice that I'll give is, don't rely on natural bodies of water for your pet to drink out of. If you're out there enjoying nature with them, bring along clean, fresh water for them like you would do yourself. We do have resources at michigan.gov/HABs, and that includes some guides and videos on identifying cyanobacterial blooms compared to other algae. And again, I'll share the harmful algal bloom map. It's online at michigan.gov/HABs. This shows verified HAB reports and cyanotoxin testing results. We have different layers that show the most recent 2 weeks and then the entire season. And we update this once a week. Importantly for this map, this is just where blooms were reported to us and the conditions at the time of that report. This isn't meant to be used to indicate where you should and shouldn't swim. And, many blooms may go unreported to us. And so, yeah. And with that, here's my email address if anyone would like to contact me.
Thank you, Alex. That was great. Great overview of the ways that algal toxins can affect us and the pets and livestock that we care for. We have lots of great questions in the Q&A box. For folks who are dropping them in the chat, please also put them in the Q&A box so we can answer some of them in behind the scenes. Several folks are wondering about well water and if well water is at risk of algal toxins, especially if they're located near lakes with blooms. Are there ways to purify water if needed, and what would the testing process look like there?
Sure. So there may be wells, depending on the circumstances of the well, like how deep it is, its age, and its exact proximity to a lake with a bloom. Some of them might be vulnerable, but we don't think that the vast majority of wells are vulnerable. If a lake with a bloom was to flood over the top of the well, that would be a cause for concern. If people do have specific questions about the susceptibility of their wells, they can reach out to MDHHS or their local health department. And if there was a circumstance where we identified a well that we thought was at risk of cyanotoxins, we can test the water.
Great, thank you. Is there good research on how long toxins linger in the water after the visible bloom dissipates?
So for microcystin, which is the most common cyanotoxin that we've found, it's primarily intracellular, so it's within the cells. And that's why we see high concentrations of it in the visible blooms and then not outside of it. And then when those cyanobacteria start dying off, the microcystin and the water degrades very quickly. It's actually, the research shows that there's like bacteria in the water that eat it up. There's more information that suggests cylindrospermopsin does not degrade very quickly. And I'm not familiar with amatoxin A. I'm not familiar with finding that outside of blooms. but we also typically just test, you know, blooms. So.
Thank you for that. A handful of people are wondering about the winter that we've been having, lack of ice cover in the lakes being generally a little bit warmer than they might be. Do we think that a winter like this might predict more or earlier HABs? That might be a question for some of our other presenters as well.
Yes, there's a lot of interactions there. What I'll start off with is with an earlier summer, ice coming off, we might reach stratification earlier. So that is where warm water sits on top of cold water. If it starts earlier, that gives a longer stratified period, this calm, warm water up top. That's good for certain species of cyanobacteria, like microcystis. Also, as there's a longer period for stratification to take place, there might be more nutrient release in the lower parts of the lake, so that when the lake mixes in the fall, that might release more nutrients for cyanobacteria that do well during mixing periods. So there's a lot of nuance in there, but there's the quick answer.
Great. And maybe one more question specifically for Alex before we move to the final presentation and then the last Q&A section. Several folks are wondering if we have stats, general stats, about how many reports of HABs cause human illnesses we see in Michigan, or animal illnesses also.
Yeah, so we do track that, and I don't have that number right in front of me. I can provide that number. I will say that located at michigan.gov/HABs under the reports section, we just got up on there summaries for 2021 and 2022, and those contain the human and animal numbers of human and animal illness reports for 2021 and 2022. As far as numbers, we're really talking about like single digits that have been reported to us.
Although, like you had mentioned, there's the symptoms of a HAB exposure do look a lot like food poisoning or overdoing it in the sun or all sorts of other things that might affect you when you're out on the lake or enjoying a warm day. So the numbers are, I'm sure, a little bit tricky to really know if the full accurate count is there, but glad to know that they're generally low.